Last month, Russian President Vladimir Putin boasted that everything was under control. Now he admits Russia is in trouble as the country copes with a rising number of coronavirus infections. Today, the number surged past the 20,000 mark. NPR's Charles Maines reports from the epicenter of the outbreak, Moscow.
It was just 3 weeks ago that Vladimir Putin, dressed in a biohazard suit, and toured Moscow's new coronavirus infection ward. After the photo op and out of his protective gear, Putin chatted and shook hands with staff. He praised their efforts, saying things were going like clockwork, and the center was an example of how treatment should be organized. Initially, as the coronavirus pandemic swept the globe, Russia remained largely unscathed, with few cases and seemingly fewer worries. Yet fast forward to this week, and Putin is now sounding the alarm. The situation is changing practically every day, and not for the better, said Putin in a meeting with his coronavirus task force, adding the next few weeks would be decisive. For some exasperated Moscow ambulance drivers, that moment may have already arrived. Over the weekend, they faced long lines. Some had to wait up to 15 hours just to deliver their patients to local COVID-19 wards. The city has been on lockdown for 2 weeks, but cases continue to rise. And there are doubts about the reliability of those numbers. Critics point to a sudden spike in the number of Russians suffering from pneumonia that may disguise the true impact of the coronavirus. Dr. Anastasia Vasilyeva of the medical group Doctors Alliance says the numbers have been intentionally manipulated for political purposes. The Kremlin had been planning to hold a constitutional referendum next week, whose key provision would allow Putin to remain in power until the year 2036. But the coronavirus has outpaced Kremlin intrigue, and ultimately Putin was forced to postpone the vote. And even the leader's photo op at the Moscow infection ward has come back to haunt him. The chief doctor who met with Putin has since tested positive for COVID-19. The Kremlin says Putin remains healthy. But he now also works remotely, just like the rest of us. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
It's 5:18 and you're listening to All Things Considered on NHPR. I'm Peter Biello. Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar is pushing a plan to expand mail-in voting during the COVID-19 pandemic.
People should not have to decide between their own health and their own right to vote. We can do both.
Coming up, Klobuchar joins us to talk more about her proposal. That's in 15 minutes on NHPR, where support for programming comes from listeners like you and from Granite United Way, helping New Hampshire residents during the COVID-19 pandemic. Learn more at graniteuw.org. And from Dartmouth-Hitchcock Norris Cotton Cancer Center, an NCI-designated comprehensive cancer center with more than 200 cancer specialists. go.d-h.org/cancer.
Blood tests that can identify people who've been exposed to the coronavirus are coming on the market quickly.
What if we're already immune and we just don't know it? We don't have to be scared.
But how much can we rely on the results?
The test will be wrong half the time. Half the people will be falsely reassured.
How they still might be useful on the next Morning Edition from NPR News.
Listen to Morning Edition with Rick Ganley weekday mornings from 5 until 9 on NHPR. Stream it live at nhpr.org. In the forecast for tonight, mostly cloudy skies, lows in the mid-30s in the south, mid-20s in the north. And for tomorrow, partly sunny skies with highs in the low 50s in the south, mid-40s in the north. Tune in to New Hampshire Calling tonight at 7 o'clock. It's a chance for you to share your perspective on life during the coronavirus pandemic. Tonight we're going to be talking about small businesses. Are you making a concerted effort to visit small businesses? Do you own or run one? Let us know what it's like for you. Give us a call. The number is 603-513-7700. And tune in for New Hampshire Calling tonight at 7 here on NHPR.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Constant Contact, providing small businesses with tools to sell online and stay in touch with customers. Information about their new small business support kit with guidance and action plans is at constantcontact.com. And from Fidelity Wealth Management, where advisors work with their clients to develop flexible investment strategies that can evolve as their needs change. Learn more at fidelity.com/wealth. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Ari Shapiro.
And I'm Elsa Chang. We've been hearing a lot lately about how we need to know who's sick and who might have been exposed to the coronavirus if we ever want to get back to something like normal life. Some people in public health and in Silicon Valley think our smartphones can help. For this week's All Tech Considered, NPR's Shannon Bond has more, and we should note Apple and Google are both NPR sponsors.
Lifting the lockdowns means testing a lot more people for the coronavirus. And you're going to hear this phrase more: contact tracing. That's what public health officials use to track who patients have interacted with and make sure those people get tested or go into quarantine. Dr. Louise Ivers of Massachusetts General Hospital says this is usually done by asking each patient a bunch of questions.
Who did you spend your time with over the last 2 weeks? Who did you spend more than 10 minutes with? Were you 6 feet apart? Were you closer than 6 feet?
But that takes a lot of time and effort. So here's how smartphones could help, if we're willing to let them track us. Imagine two people sitting near each other in the park. Call them Alice and Bob. They both have smartphones that are sending out Bluetooth signals.
That technology is able to send out anonymous little chirps, little messages that other phones can listen to.
Daniel Weitzner is a research scientist at MIT who's been working on a project using this Bluetooth technology. Now Apple and Google are teaming up to do the same thing. The idea is this: Alice and Bob's phones have a list of the Bluetooth signals they've received. If Bob comes down with COVID-19, he can mark himself as infected in an app from his public health department. The system uses the record of those anonymous Bluetooth signals to warn anyone whose phone has come near his in the last 2 weeks. People like Alice. Dr. Ivers says using smartphones this way would not replace traditional contact tracing, but could give it a boost.
This approach can both expand the reach, because you may not remember who you were on the bus with, or you may not have known those people.
It could also free up public health officials to focus on people who don't have smartphones or who are particularly vulnerable. It's not a fail-safe. Bluetooth signals reach further than the 6 feet we're told to stay apart. And for the system to be effective, a lot of people need to participate.
We need the network effect of everyone being able to hear all of these chirps.
Which is why Apple and Google, normally big rivals, are working together. About 3 billion people around the world have either an iPhone or Android. So if a lot of them opt in, this could really make a difference. But convincing people to trust the tech giants with what is, after all, a form of surveillance is a challenge. Weitzner says these Bluetooth messages do not reveal who sent them or from where.
We don't need to know where you were close to someone, just that you were close to someone.
Apple and Google are putting pretty strict limits on their system. Only public health agencies can use it, and the government can't force people to turn on tracking. The Bluetooth signals, those random numbers, they stay on your phone. That means not even Apple or Google can trace where you've been. But people are already asking if we're giving up too much about ourselves. Ashkan Soltani was chief technologist at the Federal Trade Commission. He worries about the implications of unleashing this technology.
Whether you require, for example, people to have used this app and to provide their score on the app in order to, for example, return back to work or use public transportation.
Apple and Google say they'll release their system next month. And already, Democrats in Congress are warning that they'll keep a close eye on how the tech giants handle privacy. Shannon Bond, NPR News, San Francisco.
Support for All Tech Considered comes from C3.ai. C3.ai's software enables organizations to use artificial intelligence at enterprise scale, solving previously unsolvable business problems. Learn more at C3.ai.
How does one grieve during a pandemic? In the Chinese city of Wuhan, it's done under constant government supervision. NPR's Emily Feng is in Wuhan, where she spoke to families struggling to mourn loved ones who've died of COVID-19.
Zhang Hai is racked with guilt. In mid-January, the Wuhan native took his 76-year-old father, Zhang Nifa, from southern China, where he works, to Wuhan, seeking medical treatment for a bone fracture. Unbeknownst to him, health authorities there were already monitoring an outbreak involving dozens of cases of a SARS-like pneumonia. If the Wuhan government had disclosed more about the virus, Zhang says, he would have never driven his father back. Instead, the elder Zhang contracted COVID-19 in Wuhan's Central Theater Command Hospital, a special military hospital. He died February 1st with his son by his side. Zhang managed to dress his father with new clothes head to toe, per Chinese tradition. He says he wanted to restore his father's dignity before he left this world, like a human being deserves. Other traditions, like burning paper money together, had to be abandoned. Because of the coronavirus epidemic, Wuhan crematoriums didn't even begin releasing the remains of loved ones who died until late March. Anyone who died during the COVID-19 outbreak in Wuhan, like Zhang's father, was cremated for free at government expense, regardless of whether they died of the virus. Grave plots are also subsidized. Some are now 30% off. But there's a catch. Like everyone in Wuhan, Zhang had to arrange a time to pick up his father's ashes this month while accompanied by neighborhood officials or workplace supervisors. These officials are also required to accompany the family member to the burial plot. Zhang refused to do so. He told the officials he wanted to send his father off himself without strangers around so he could be at peace. After all, in his mind, if it hadn't been for him, his father would still be alive. So now, more than 2 months after his death, the elder Zhang's ashes lie unburied in a mortuary. Chinese people are quite reserved, Zhang says. Taking care of his father, sending him off, this is how he wants to show his love, even if he couldn't say the words out loud when his father was alive. Wuhan's government wants to prevent public gatherings, where the risk of virus transmission is high. So starting April 3rd, right before a holiday commemorating the dead, they banned people from freely gathering at cemeteries and crematoriums until the end of the month. They also want to control public expressions of grief, especially as anger over how local officials initially covered up the outbreak continues to roil the country. Zhang Hai believes his father needs a send-off befitting of the Communist Party member who served his country. In the 1960s, he says his father participated in China's nuclear weapons project and suffered radiation exposure. Zhang says he, his father, and grandfather, they all loved their country. The day after Zhang met with NPR, 2 government officials visited his home in Wuhan. He gets constant calls from neighborhood officials reminding him not to talk to media and demanding to know his location. He believes his phone is being monitored. Another family NPR tried to interview refused to meet because they had a camera installed by neighborhood officials outside their front door, monitoring them. A third family created a chat group for other mourning families. They were accosted by police and forced to disband the group. But Zhang says he will continue his fight to bury his father alone. He says he owes that to his father. It was only after he died that Zhang realized how important his father was to him, he says. You feel their absence strongly. A person only ever has one father. Later, we take a walk through the Wuhan park that Zhang frequently brought his father to. He points out the bridge where he took a picture of his father on only last year. The scenery is still the same, he sighs, but the person he was once with is no longer here. Emily Fang, NPR News, Wuhan.
When you look at the political calendar, we're in the spring of an election year. Joe Biden is going to be the Democratic nominee. So you have to figure that many Democrats just don't want this to be true.
I'm Michael Barbaro. That's Today on the Daily from the New York Times.
The Daily coming up at 6:30 here on NHPR. It's 5:29. This is All Things Considered on New Hampshire Public Radio. I'm Peter Biello. Many businesses across New Hampshire are closed right now because of the coronavirus pandemic, but some are busier than ever. Birthing centers, small midwife-led facilities, are getting inundated with calls from expectant parents. NHPR's Lauren Truljan will report why in about 15 minutes here on NHPR.